So hello, welcome to the video and welcome to Slough. Yes, of course. I'm not in Slough, I'm in Toronto, and that is the CN Tower behind me. But my time here has already come to an end and it's time to head home. Now there are 4, 5, I don't know, 6 direct flights a day between Toronto and London. But this is Matt's planet. That would be far too easy. So my return trip is built around a flight from Boston to Madrid. It's a very long story as to how I've ended up on that flight that I'll actually save for the next video. But it means I need to get from here in Toronto to Boston, and then I need to get from Madrid back up to London. And that's actually okay, because for some time now I've wanted to experience Toronto's second airport. Yes, Toronto has a second airport. It's called Billy Bishop Airport, and think London City, or perhaps better, think of the second airport in Rio, the name of which escapes me right now, because that airport and Billy Bishop here in Toronto are built out into the lake. But I'm going to walk there, which will make this the 4th airport I've been able to walk to from my accommodation after Gibraltar, Bonaire and San Andres, all experiences that I've shared on this channel. And I'll be flying on Porter Airlines, which is a reasonable newcomer in the Canadian aviation market, but they're growing fast and they have a good reputation. They are competing quite strongly on a lot of Canadian domestic routes as well as international ones, such as the one I am flying today. And there are various restrictions on the size of aircraft that can use Billy Bishop Airport, so I'll be flying today on a Dash 8. Flown on them before, but not covered that before on the channel. It's a couple of hours down to Boston, which is quite a long time in a propeller aircraft, and hopefully we don't all end up with chronic earache after spending that long in that sort of accommodation. But I'm up the front in what's called a premium economy seat, which does bring with it some perks and benefits, and I'm really quite looking forward to this. So if you'd like to see what the walk along to Billy Bishop Airport is like, what that airport actually turns out to be like when you get there, and what the experience on down to Boston is like, stick around. Hi, I'm Matt and this is Matt's Planet. I aim to entertain, educate and inspire with my travel adventures from planning to execution. I'll show you how you can travel in style for a lot less than you'd think. So subscribe so you can come with me. First stop was breakfast at Timmy's. Quite nice actually, and they make a quite respectable cup of tea. It was just over a mile to Billy Bishop Airport. The urge to call it Billy Bob Airport is almost overwhelming, so apologies in advance to Air Marshal William Bishop, VC, CB, DSO and Bar, MC, DFC, ED, if I slip up. He's quite an interesting chap to Google actually. And a very pleasant walk it was too, along Toronto's waterfront. It would be considerably less fun in January, but in late July it was lovely, even if there were a few spots of rain to dodge. Through the Toronto Music Garden, then it's turn left to the airport. Unlike Rio's Santos Dumont Airport, I looked up the name, Billy Bishop is actually on an island. Until 2015, everyone and everything reached the airport via a ferry. This ferry, to be specific, or its sibling. Even though it's not located on an island, the only other airport I know of that can only realistically be accessed by ferry is Freetown Airport in Sierra Leone. It's a 3 to 5 hour drive otherwise. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any other airport accessible by ferry. So imagine my disappointment when I learned that the ferry was not in service that day, so I'd have to take the tunnel. That tunnel was considerably less interesting than the ferry, but as tunnels go, it was quite nice. Travelators assisting the crossing in both directions. I took the escalators back up in the interests of variety. The elevator would have been a lot quicker. Matt's Tunnels, my next channel perhaps. Porter dominates departures here, with Air Canada also operating flights to Montreal and Ottawa. I was flying as a Porter Reserve passenger. I'll explain the distinction to Porter's classic offering as we go. The first reserve benefit is a dedicated check-in zone, which I completely failed to notice, but fortunately the regular check-in area was really quiet. The agent demanded to see proof that I had an ESTA, which really annoyed me, as the ESTA is supposed to exist entirely as an electronic document. Apparently Porter Airlines can't see the US system which holds them and is on the hook if they deliver someone to the US border without one. I usually carry a printout of my ESTA with me, as I have been asked for it before when boarding a cruise in the US, but I didn't take it this time as I really didn't think I'd need it. It was simple enough to pull it up electronically though. You need to search for the ESTA application page, then search for applications in progress. You'll need to enter a few passport details, but you should definitely have that with you if you end up in this position. Up popped the details and the agent was able to check me in without further incident. The ESTA exists entirely online, except when it doesn't. As a US bound passenger, you are then steered to a dedicated US bound security point. There's no US pre-clearance at this airport, unlike at Toronto's Pearson Airport, although I believe discussions are underway to open a facility here. Pre-clearance allows you to complete US entry formalities before you get on the plane, so you can arrive as a domestic passenger. Again, I think Porter Reserve gives you a shortcut here through security, but I didn't spot it, and there was no queue anyway. I was quickly through, and you get some panoramic views of the city straight after the security point as a reward. Then it's a short walk around to another escalator, down this time, at the bottom of which you'll find the departure lounge. This is solely for international passengers, which means it's solely used by Porter, and it's one of those areas where you can see all four corners of it from just about every point within the space. No status lounges, as Porter's reserve tickets don't include lounge access, and there's no contract lounges either. Just a duty-free shop, a Hudson News and a small cafe. I say just, but I quite liked the space. It was calm and it had what you needed. And if what you need is close-up views of propeller aircraft with the Toronto city skyline as a backdrop, then you'll be very happy. I didn't see it, but the domestic wing of the terminal has an Air Canada cafe available to their status passengers, which seems to also be an Aspire lounge accessible with a priority pass. But this international wing was lounge free, so I found a seat and sat in it. Boarding was a little delayed, no explanation was given, but eventually Porter Reserve guests were called to board, and we progressed down the walkway to the door, where we were held as the pilots dealt with something. A Dash 8 isn't over-endowed with overhead bins, so larger rollerboards are seized here to be put in the hold. We were stood there for over 10 minutes before we were turned around and sent back to the terminal. Our plane had flown in earlier that morning from Ottawa, where it had been parked overnight. At some point that morning, the weather forecast had changed, which meant we didn't now have enough fuel to make it to Boston with enough in reserve for emergencies. Which I think makes sense, but it does feel like quite bad planning. And instead of whacking in an extra couple of gallons of Jet A1, which would seem to be the logical fix, Porter instead had no option but to lighten the plane, which they hoped to achieve by asking for 6 volunteers to travel on a flight later that day. In return for volunteering, they'd receive an $800 future travel voucher, Canadian dollars of course, usable only with Porter. I think they had to bump it to $900 to win over the 6 people they needed, but it only took them about 10 minutes to sort things out, and then it was deja vu all over again as we were called forward to board. Straight on this time, up the steps into this 14-year-old Bombardier Dash 8 that's been with Porter since delivery. It was actually built in the Toronto area too, I think. Porter Reserve's next perk is the ability to select an extra legroom seat up front. 2D for me that day, which was the front row of the right side of the cabin. Decent legroom, but there was no window immediately beside you here, although the exit door window was very easy to reach. Very little seat width though. Porter Reserve doesn't stretch to blocking a seat next to you, as a Euro business fare may do. I say decent legroom. The front row on the left side of the cabin had more footroom, but they were already taken when I bought my ticket. And as an exit row seat, all baggage had to be stored in the overhead bins. A literature/tablet pocket was in front of you, and there's that window. Overhead lights and air vents, and that's it for the seat review. I have to say it was snug with a seatmate, but the view out of that window was quite special, better than you get from Toronto's Pearson Airport, where Porter also operates, and from where they operate larger Embraer 195 jets. And as I'd not been able to get a good shot of our Dash 8 before boarding, another one very obligingly arrived and parked up right next to us. Jet engines move air in a different way to propellers, but they perform the same basic function, so flying in a propeller aircraft should not worry you any more than flying with jet engines would. All of that faffing about fuel meant we ended up being pushed back about 45 minutes late, and it took a few more to line up for takeoff. I saw planes operating in both directions when I was in Toronto, so it is lucky dip as to whether you get a city view for takeoff, but I was lucky that day and had picked the correct side. Having said that, we took off towards the west, so neither side of the plane got a great view of the central Toronto skyline. I had some hopes of being able to see Niagara after takeoff, but we did a pretty sharp left turn as we were climbing, so there were no views that day. The weather was still clear though, so we did get a good view of upstate New York as we crossed into US airspace. The final benefit of Porter Reserve is an elevated meal on longer flights. Somehow I had it in mind that this flight would take a couple of hours, as I said in that intro, but we ended up being in the air for just 78 minutes. So this wasn't a longer flight, so there was no elevated meal, and I believe the service we experienced up front was the same as you got down the back. Although saying that, the snack basket we got to choose from in the front rows went back in the overhead bins once we'd chosen, so perhaps it was a different experience down the back. Porter offers wine, beer and soft drinks to all passengers, so it was crisps and a beer for me, and a Moosehead beer too, the last major brewery in Canada to be owned by Canadians apparently. This was a very Canadian experience. Time passed, not that restfully, it has to be said. Propellers are quite noisy anyway, and the aural annoyance was amplified by a screaming baby a few rows back. Plus the weather did close in a bit and it got a bit bumpy. I did get a second beer though, which I enjoyed with some elbow room as my seatmate went to the loo. I still only film airplane lavatories when there's something interesting to show, and I am confident that you're not missing anything, as I didn't need to visit the facilities myself. Then the snack basket came out again, a chocolate chip cookie for me this time. The cloud built up below us. I'm not completely clear on what it was about this cloud that increased our fuel burn so significantly, but we descended into it and it became really quite bumpy. But we eventually broke through the cloud and got a glimpse of a rainy and not particularly appealing Boston. And down into Logan Airport. I paid 325 Canadian dollars for this Porter premium flight, which is around 175 quid. That was about 50 or 60 quid more than a Porter Classic ticket cost when I booked, but from reading the website I thought the premium would be worth it for the elevated premium experience I would receive and for the elevated video I would be able to make. But the check-in and security benefits were neutralised by the quietness of the airport, and the elevated meal benefits were neutralised by the shortness of the flight. I got some extra legroom and was able to board first, but my conclusion was that Porter Premium really wasn't worth the extra. It's designed to be a premium economy product rather than a business class, but as Porter already elevates its regular economy product, there's not a huge difference in the experience. I enjoyed the flight though, the crew was very friendly and the wider Porter experience was very pleasant. But they can't see Esther's and they got me to Boston 40 minutes late. So it was quite expensive for the experience that I received. But the absolute best thing about the experience was Billy Bishop Airport, a downtown airport you can walk to on an island accessible by ferry some of the time, with amazing views and extreme convenience. What's not to like? And I would certainly fly Porter again, especially if I was heading to or from Toronto. Although I'd save the money and put up with being squeezed into a regular economy seat. Off into Boston Airport and another brilliant, effortless entry into the United States using my global entry. It really is amazing and is worth every penny in my opinion. So thanks for watching, blah, blah, blah. If you're still watching, you probably know what blah, blah, blah means. Liking and commenting helps the video be found in the YouTube algorithm. Subscribing is free and makes it easier for YouTube to let you know when I have a new video out there. And if you'd like to support what I'm doing, there's a Patreon account, the link to which is below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.